Thank God. This incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend starting now. Kang sat in the cold metal chair and tried not to look nervous. Across the table, 3 aliens stared at her with expressions she could not read. The reptilian one, Commander Thexville, had vertical pupils that never blinked. The insect-like Officer Quilnara made clicking sounds with her mandibles. The crystalline enforcer, Breckmore, glowed faintly in the dim light, his body refracting colors that hurt to look at directly. Behind them, a wide window showed another room. 4 small, furry creatures paced back and forth. They looked like a mix between cats and bears with round ears and thick tails. Their silver fur caught the light as they moved. Every few seconds, one of them would press tiny paws against the glass and stare toward Hannah. "Dr. Kang," Commander Thexville said, his voice harsh and dry. "You have been seen with 4 Valerium cubs for 3 weeks. Why?" Hannah took a breath. "I haven't been with them." "Music. They've been near me." "The same thing." Quilnara clicked, her translator turning the sounds into words. "You have violated station regulations. Class 4 species must remain in containment." "Music. You are not authorized to interact with them." "I didn't take them from containment." Hannah said. "Music." She kept her voice calm and steady, the way she had practiced. "They came to me." Music." A Breckmore leaned forward. His crystalline body made grinding sounds. "Impossible. Valerium cubs are non-sentient. They cannot make such decisions. They follow food. They follow warmth. They follow dominant adults of their species. You are none of these things." Hannah glanced at the window. The smallest cub was drawing something on the fogged glass with one paw. It looked like circles connected by lines. "They don't follow me," she said quietly. "They decide to walk the same path." The 3 security officers exchanged looks. Thexville pulled up a holographic display. Images appeared in the air between them. Hannah saw herself in the station cafeteria with 4 cubs sitting under her table. Another image showed her in the laboratory with the cubs watching from a corner. Another showed her walking through a corridor with all 4 cubs trailing behind her in a line. "These images show following behavior," Thexville, music, said. "Clear and obvious. Those images show them being in the same place at the same time as me." Hannah corrected. "That's different." Quilnara's mandibles clacked rapidly. Her translator struggled to keep up. "You split hairs with words. The Valerium Collective has filed a formal complaint. They say you have stolen their offspring. They say you have corrupted young minds that are not yet minds at all. They demand your removal from the station and a lifetime ban from all galactic facilities." The words hit Hannah like cold water. A lifetime ban meant never working in space again. It meant never studying alien species. It meant the end of everything she had worked for. But she forced herself to stay calm. "May I ask a question?" she said. Breckmore's glow intensified. "You are not in a position to ask questions." "I'll take that as a yes," Hannah said, and immediately regretted her tone. She needed to be careful. "If the cubs are non-sentient as you say, how can I corrupt them? You can't corrupt something that doesn't think." Silence filled the room. The 3 officers looked at each other again. "Music." Finally, Thexville spoke. "You imprint on them like a parent bird to its young. You make them dependent. When they mature and gain sentience at age 12, they will be damaged. Music, unable to integrate into Valerium society." Hannah shook her head. "I've done nothing to imprint on them. I've never restricted their movement. I've never forced them to stay near me. I've never even called them to me." Music." "Then explain their behavior," Quilnara demanded. Hannah looked at the window again. All 4 cubs were watching her now. Their eyes were bright, music, and focused. The smallest one tapped on the glass and the others turned to look at it. They seemed to have a silent conversation. Then all 4 of them sat down at the same time and continued staring. 3 weeks ago," Hannah began, "I was doing a routine inspection of Cargo Bay 7. There was a damaged transport ship there. The crew was in Stacy's pods waiting for rescue. But in the back of the bay, I found these 4 cubs. They were alone, scared. The life support in their section had failed. Music. They were cold and hungry. She paused, remembering that moment. The cubs had been huddled together in the darkness shivering. When her light had found them, they hadn't run. They had just stared at her with those bright eyes. Station protocol said to put them in holding cells until their people arrived. Hannah continued. Music. But they were so small, so frightened. I couldn't just leave them in that cold, dark place. So, I sat down on the floor about 10 feet away from them. I didn't move toward them. I didn't try to touch them. I just sat there. That is when the imprinting began. Thexville said, "No," Hannah said firmly. That is when they made their first choice. After 6 hours, the smallest one walked over to me. Not for food. I had put food near them and they hadn't touched it. This cub walked up to me and put a broken data pad in my lap. Then it pointed at the pad and looked at me. Breckmore made a grinding sound that might have been a laugh. Cub's gesture. Music. It means nothing. It wasn't just a gesture, Hannah said. It was a request. The cub wanted me to fix the data pad, so I did. When I got it working, the cub took it back and showed it to the others. They gathered around it and started touching the screen. They were looking at star maps. Quilnara's antennae twitched. Pre-programmed behavior. Cubs do not understand star maps. These ones did, Hannah said. I watched them for another hour. Music. They were teaching each other how to use the controls. They were pointing at different stars and making sounds at each other. They were communicating. Errant music. The door behind the officers opened. A new figure entered the room and Hannah's breath caught in her throat. It was a Valerium adult, massive and imposing. He stood 9 foot tall with golden fur that shimmered in the light. His eyes were the same bright color as the cubs, but they held something the cubs' eyes didn't. Coldness. I am Ambassador Krelvar, of the Valerium Collective. The newcomer said. His voice was deep and resonant. I have come to retrieve our cubs and see that this human, music, faces proper justice. He looked at Hannah with something that might have been discussed. You have poisoned, music, young animals with false ideas. You have made them believe they are more than they are. This is cruelty, not kindness. Hannah stood up even though she knew it made her look small next to the towering alien. They're not animals. They are people. Small people, young people, but people. Krelvar's lips pulled back showing sharp teeth. They are cubs. When they reach maturity, they will become people. Not before. This is our way. This is our biology. Music. You cannot change it with your human sentimentality. I'm not trying to change anything. Hannah said. I'm just telling you what I saw, what I see every day. Music. Those cubs think. They feel. They choose. That's not sentiment. That's music, fact. The ambassador turned to the security officers. I want them separated immediately. Every moment she spends near them causes more damage. Return them to music, proper containment. Return them to the collective. We will repair what we can. Behind the glass, the 4 cubs suddenly became agitated. They pressed against the window, making high-pitched sounds. The smallest one started hitting the glass with both paws over and over. Hannah's heart broke at the sound. You can't take them, she said, her voice breaking. Please, just let me prove what they are. Give me time. Krelvar laughed. A sound like time for you to complete your corruption? No. This ends now. The security officer stood up. Thexville pulled out a data pad. Dr. Hannah Kang. You are hereby charged with unauthorized interaction with Class 4 species, potential theft of Valerium property, and violation of interspecies protocols. You will be held pending trial. The cubs will be remanded to Ambassador Krelvar's custody. Hannah felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. Through the window, she watched the smallest cub draw one more shape on the glass. It was crude and simple but clear. A large figure and 4 small figures standing in a circle. Not in a line. A circle. As guards came to take her away, Hannah heard herself say, they don't follow. They decide, and you're going to have to prove they don't. 3 weeks earlier, Hannah had been having a normal day. She walked through the corridors of Station Meridian 7 with her assistant, Ben Park, reviewing data on their shared tablet. They were supposed to check Cargo Bay 7 for biological contamination. A transport ship had docked there 2 days ago with engine trouble, and protocol required inspection before repairs could continue. This should be quick. Music, Ben said, scrolling through the checklist. Just standard scans, then we can get back to the lab. Hannah nodded, only half listening. Music. She was thinking about her research on cross-species communication patterns. The work was slow but fascinating. Every species in the galaxy had different ways of expressing ideas. Music, or emotions, and needs. Some used sound, others used color. Some used music, chemical signals. Humans used words, but words were just one option among thousands. The cargo bay door opened with a hiss. The space inside was enormous, designed to hold ships of various sizes. The damaged transport sat in the center, dark and silent. Music. Its hull was scorched in places. Small repair drones floated around it scanning for damage. Life support failed in sections 3 through 7, Ben read from his tablet. The crew is in Stacy's pods. Medical team already checked them. They'll be fine. What about passengers? Hannah asked. Ben checked his screen. Manifest shows 4 Valerium cubs. They were in a separate compartment with automatic life support. Should be fine. Hannah frowned. Should be. The system failed for 30 minutes before backup kicked in, Ben admitted. But Valerium are tough. They can handle cold better than we can. Something bothered Hannah about that. Cubs were young. Young bodies weren't as tough as adult bodies. That was true for almost every species. She walked toward the transport ship, her scanner in hand. Hannah, the cubs are probably sleeping, Ben called after her. Don't wake them up. Music. We are not supposed to interact. But Hannah wasn't planning to interact. She just wanted to make sure they were okay. She climbed up the loading ramp and entered the ship. Music. Inside emergency lights cast everything in red. The air was cold enough to see her breath. She followed the corridor to the rear compartment where the cubs should be. The door was open. The room beyond was dark. Hannah turned on her light and swept it across the space. At first, she saw nothing. Then her light found the corner. 4 small shapes were pressed together in a tight huddle. Silver fur reflected her beam. Hello. Music. Hannah said softly. I'm not going to hurt you. The cubs didn't move. She took a step closer and saw that they were shivering. Their compartment had been the coldest part of the ship. The life support failure had lasted longer here than anywhere else. Food containers were scattered on the floor, some still sealed. Water dispensers blinked red, indicating they were empty. Ben. Hannah said into her communicator. Get medical up here. The cubs need help. On it, Ben's voice crackled back. Are they injured? I don't think so. But they're cold and probably dehydrated. Hannah sat down on the floor about 10 feet from the huddled cubs. She didn't want to scare them by moving too close. I'm going to stay with them until help arrives. Hannah, you shouldn't. I'm staying, Hannah said firmly. They're scared. Through her communicator she heard Ben sigh. Fine, medical team is on their way. 20 minutes. Hannah switched off the communicator and looked at the cubs. They were watching her now. 4 pairs of bright eyes reflected her light. They didn't make any sounds. They just stared. It's okay, Hannah said quietly. Music. I know you're scared. But you're safe now. The ship is safe. Help is coming. She didn't know if they could understand her words. Most non-sentient animals couldn't understand complex language. But her tone might help. Calm and gentle. That worked with most species. The cubs didn't move. Minutes passed. Hannah stayed perfectly still, just sitting there in the cold darkness. She thought about how frightening this must be for them. Separated from adults, stuck in a broken ship, cold and hungry and alone. Even if they weren't fully sentient yet, they could still feel fear. After 20 minutes, one of the cubs moved. It was the smallest one, noticeably smaller than its siblings. It took a tentative step forward, then stopped. The others made quiet chirping sounds as if warning it. But the small cub took another step. Hannah held her breath. She didn't want to spook it. She stayed perfectly still and kept her expression neutral. The cub came closer slowly, stopping every few steps to look back at the others. When it was about 3 feet away, it stopped. Then it did something unexpected. It picked up an object from the floor and carried it toward Hannah. It was a broken data pad. Its screen cracked and dark. The cub placed it carefully in Hannah's lap, then sat back and looked at her expectantly. Hannah stared at the data pad, her mind racing. This wasn't random behavior. The cub had brought her something specific and waited for a response. That suggested understanding, purpose, maybe even problem solving. "You want me to fix this?" Hannah asked. The cub chirped once and tapped the data pad with one paw. Hannah picked up the music device and examined it. The crack was superficial. The power cell had just music disconnected. She popped open the back panel, reseated the cell and pressed the power music button. The screen flickered and came to life. The small cub made an excited sound and reached for the data pad. Hannah handed it over. The cub carried it back to the others and all 4 of them gathered around it. They began touching the screen, making soft chirping sounds at each other. Hannah watched them in fascination. The cubs were looking at star maps. More than that, they were interacting with the maps. One cub would point at a star system and another would swipe to a different view. They seemed to be showing each other things, teaching each other. The door behind Hannah opened. She turned to see Ben entering with 2 medical technicians. One was Una Im, a human engineer who sometimes helped with biological cases. The other was a trail medic named Hawks. "Here," Hannah said, "music, standing up. 4 cubs. They seem healthy, just cold and scared." Una walked closer, her scanner active. Vitals look good. A little dehydrated, but nothing serious. She glanced at the cubs who were still focused on the data pad. "What are they doing?" "Looking at star maps," Hannah said. Ben frowned. Cubs don't understand star maps. That's just random touching. But Hannah was watching the cubs carefully. One of them touched a specific star system, then looked at another cub and made a series of chirps. The second cub chirped back and touched a different system. Then the first cub seemed to nod and made a longer series of sounds. "That's not random," Hannah said quietly. "That's conversation." Una moved her scanner closer to the cubs. Brain activity is higher than expected for cubs this age. "That's interesting. What does that mean?" Ben, music, asked. "It means they're thinking more than they should be," Una said. "According to Valerium biology, cubs don't develop complex cognition until after their physical transformation at age 12. But these scans show cognition levels consistent with sentient beings." Hawks, the medic, made a whistling sound of concern. "That cannot be correct. Valerium cubs are classified as non-sentient. The collective is very clear about this." "Maybe the collective is wrong," Hannah said. The words hung in the air. "Music." Ben looked at her with wide eyes. "Hannah, you can't just say things like that. The Valerium collective has been part of galactic society for 600 years. Music. They know their own biology." "Do they?" Hannah watched the cubs. The smallest one had given the data pad to another. Music. Who was now showing something to the group. Or do they know what they've always believed? Those aren't always the same thing. Una knelt down near the cubs, moving slowly. She held out a water container. "Hey, little ones. You must be thirsty." The cubs looked at the container, then at each other. After a moment, the largest cub walked forward and took the container. It didn't drink immediately. Instead, it carried the water back to the others. It gave the container to the smallest cub first. Hannah felt something tighten in her chest. That was care. That was thinking about others. Music. That was exactly what sentient beings did. "We need to report this," Hawk said nervously. "If these cubs are showing sentient behavior, it's a major issue." "Report what?" Ben asked. "That they shared water? That they looked at pictures? The collective will say it's instinct." "Is it instinct?" Hannah asked. She pointed at the cubs. "Music. A look at them. Really look." They all watched as the 4 cubs finished drinking. Then the largest cub used its paws to arrange the empty containers in a neat line. The second cub started touching the data pad again. The third cub moved to the warmest part of the room and chirped at the others. They all moved to join it, settling into a new huddle in the better location. They're adapting, Una said softly, making decisions based on their environment. That's not simple instinct. Hannah sat down again, this time closer to the cubs. They watched her, but didn't seem afraid anymore. What if we've been wrong about them? She asked. What if they've been sentient all along and nobody noticed because nobody expected it? Ben shook his head. That's a huge claim. Music. The kind of claim that could cause a diplomatic incident. I know, Hannah, music, said. But look at them. Tell me they're not thinking. Tell me they're not aware. Nobody spoke. The cubs chirped quietly among themselves, their bright eyes reflecting the emergency lights. Music. The smallest one drew shapes in the frost on the floor. Simple shapes, but deliberate. Circles and lines. Station protocol says they go to holding until their people arrive, Hawk said finally. That should be in 3 days. Hannah looked at the cold dark room. I'm not leaving them in this ship. Hannah, Ben started. I'm not, she said firmly. They've been cold and scared for 2 days. I'm staying with them until they're moved somewhere better. And she did. The holding cell was small but clean. Hannah sat on the narrow bench and, music, stared at the wall. She had been here. 6 hours since the security officers had taken her from music, the interrogation room. Nobody had come to speak with her. Nobody had brought food or water. She was just alone with her thoughts, and her thoughts were not good company. She kept seeing the cubs pressed against the glass, the way they had tried to reach her, the sounds they had made. What would happen to them now? Would Ambassador Krelfar take them back to the collective? Would they be separated? Would they be punished for the behaviors they had learned? The door opened,